Now, one of the most important things that the NLRB has to do is determine what is the appropriate bargaining unit. Okay, and they're looking for a unit that has a common interest, so that they are a community of interest. Okay, so do the employees have a shared interest so that they should bargain together? Okay, that's the idea behind collective bargaining. Do they have common wages, common working conditions? Do they receive similar training? Do they have similar skills? Is there a prior history of collective bargaining together? Have these employees been transferred together? Or do they work together? Is there some kind of geographic or physical proximity in the workplace? Is there a common management oversight, such as a territorial division or a similar administrative oversight? Next, the NLRB is going to determine the eligibility of people to vote in the election. Okay? So a person needs to be employed in a job that's within the bargaining unit, and that employment has to be during the period, usually the payroll period immediately preceding the date of the consent agreement is the beginning of that time period. And they need to be employed on the date of the election. Now, if there is a strike, striking employees can vote as long as they were employed within 12 months of the beginning of that strike. Now, some petitions for secret ballot elections can be rejected if they are untimely. Okay, so if there was a previous election that was held within the previous 12 months, there cannot be another secret ballot election. And if the employees are already certified with a different unit and covered by a contract, again, there cannot be a new secret ballot election. Now, the contract bar doctrine says that a valid multi-year contract protects the union and it bars the representation election for up to 3 years. Okay, so by obtaining a valid multi-year contract, there cannot be another representation election. The Excelsior rule is a way for the NLRB to have the employer provide the names and addresses of eligible voters, and that has to be done within 7 days of a consent or directed election order. Now, what are the outcomes of representation elections, the secret ballot elections held by the NLRB? Well, typically voter turnout is quite high, and so research by the NLRB suggests that typically 90% of eligible voters will vote in a representation election. Now, voter turnout tends to decrease as the time it takes to have an election increases. So the tactic that organizations use to extend the time before an election may actually be effective. So the longer times worsen the union's chance of winning. When the size of the bargaining unit is larger, the union is less likely to win. When the size of the bargaining unit is smaller, the union is more likely to win. Now, the type of union supporting the organizing effort can have an effect. If there is a big labor image that is negative, oftentimes that will hurt a union's chance of winning the election. And so this is consistent with this next finding that independents tend to do better than those that are affiliated with the AFL-CIO, the big labor organizations. So the election takes place, again, with secret ballots, and the choice is either union or no union. If there are two unions on the ballot, then there could be three choices: Union A, Union B, or no union. Elections are held at the workplace during working hours on a payday. And the decision is a simple majority decision. Those who vote decide for everybody in the bargaining units. Okay, so a majority of those who vote in the election determine. If there is a very close vote between two unions, there can be a runoff election. If a union wins that election, then that union is certified by the NLRB as the exclusive bargaining agent for that bargaining unit. There is a 7-day time period where the conduct of the election and the counting of votes of the elections can be challenged. And so businesses will often want to, again, have legal representation to make those cases and present those challenges within that time period. Now, even if there is a successful election by the union, in 1/3 of new unions, there is a failure to secure an initial labor agreement. So the contract negotiations are often very challenging for newly established unions. There are some factors that will contribute to securing first contracts successfully. So if the organization already offers high wages, then oftentimes the first contract is not as difficult to establish. If there are other unions, other bargaining units within the organization, there is a history of dealing with unions and therefore oftentimes more successful bargaining for that initial contract. And if there is a very wide margin of victory in the representation election, that can also lead to a successful first contract negotiation. If the international union is very active in its representation, and oftentimes that's because they want to kind of send a message in the success of this new union, that can also lead to success in a first contract negotiation after a successful representation election. Now, a union has certain duties as the exclusive bargaining agent of a bargaining unit. They have to represent employees in a manner that is equitable and fair to all members of the bargaining unit. So they can't be playing favorites. They also have to bargain in good faith with the employer. They have to come to the bargaining table and actually negotiate. And so they can't stonewall and seek strikes because they think it's going to help them down the line. The employer also has some responsibilities when this new bargaining unit and their bargaining agent is established. They also have to bargain in good faith with the elected union, and they have to also not bargain with any other union. Okay, maybe they favor a different union that didn't win the election. They can't bargain with that union. They have to bargain with the union that was elected by the employees. Oftentimes, the elections are for representation are very contested events, and there can be charges of unfair labor practices that take place. And when these are considered by the National Labor Relations Board, they are considered in terms of the totality of conduct. The NLRB looks at isolated incidents within the larger context of conduct during the campaign to determine if there are truly unfair labor practices. Parties cannot use forged documents. Organizations cannot make presentations to employees in a captive audience setting within 24 hours before the election. And again, employers cannot threaten or make promises of some benefit once there is an election going to take place. Also, employers cannot ask employees about what they feel about the union and whether they favor it or not. Once there is a campaign underway, an election going to be held, employers cannot be asking individual employees which way they lean. Again, that can be construed as a threat. Now, the union can distribute literature during non-working times and in non-working areas. Confidential material from the company cannot be distributed as a way of making persuasive cases. And so the union has to respect the confidentiality of the material within the company. The NLRB has made a decision that employers can ban non-employee organizers if there are other reasonable means to access employees. So films can be used during election campaigns, and I think I've given some examples of such films up on the Blackboard website. Email is often used, and while an employer can ban non-business use of email, but it can't be solely targeted at union-related email. If a business is going to ban non-business related email, they have to do it for all kinds of non-business related email. If they only target union-related email, then that would be considered an unfair labor practice. Now, more and more unions are using the internet to distribute organizing information. And so social networks can be used. With the advent of smartphones, there's more and more opportunities to get information out there and also to demonstrate some consensus within the workers that they support a union. New unions will also use the tactic of salting, trying to get organizers hired within the organization so that they can help in the organizing process. Another tactic used by new unions is that they will try and organize in the suppliers of an organization so that they can overcome the effects of outsourcing. Again, videos can be used by the union just as they can be used by the business. And again, with new technology such as YouTube, it's very easy to distribute these videos out to many different people, whether it be via computers or smartphones. Holding public rallies is often a good way to draw attention to the union and also to get support from the larger community. This also might include raising funds to support more organizing efforts. Now, just as there is a process for determining the certification of a union, unions can be decertified. And the process is in many ways very similar to the certification process. So when a majority of the bargaining unit votes to remove the union certification, that is the process of decertification. Again, it starts with a card signing campaign, and as long as you can get 30% of the unit to sign cards, to sign a petition, then you can petition the NLRB to have a decertification election. And there's many reasons why employees might decide to decertify a union. So employees might feel that their employer has been very fair and that there's no need for a union and no need for union dues. The union may have done a poor job providing services to members, and so sometimes employees become disgruntled against the union. And if a union cannot obtain an initial labor contract, then there's really no reason to be paying union dues. And if there are replacement workers being hired and business is going on as usual, again, the union is not serving its purpose.